Professor Jonathan Adler joins us now. He's a professor of law at Case Western Reserve University, a contributor to the National Review Online and the legal blog, The Volokh Conspiracy. He is one of the founding members of the organization. Thanks very much for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Good to be here.
So is this organization, and again, as you say, it's not a separate organization, but is this offshoot, let's call it, based in frustration with what you're seeing from this administration?
Well, I mean, I think that there are a lot of things that have occurred in this administration that are troubling. A lot of things that have become partisan issues that really shouldn't be partisan issues. I mean, as you note, commitment to the rule of law, belief that if one violates the law, that they should be subject to prosecution without regard for what political party they're in, that government agencies are required to comply with the law. These are all things that should not be partisan questions. And, we believe, even though many of us individually had spoken up about some of these concerns over the past year or so, we believed it was important to try and do something as a group in the hope that would attract more attention and create more room for conservatives to embrace and defend the principles that made a lot of us legal conservatives in the first place. And
to be clear, you unabashedly characterize yourself as a legal conservative, correct?
Sure, yeah, I have no problem with that label.
And so is there something specific? I mean, we were talking broadly about the rule of law here, but is there something specific that the president has done? I mean, I have to tell you, one of the things that I found to be most disturbing, and anytime these regular attacks on the sort of FBI as an entity occur, it bothers me, as opposed to, if you want to criticize Strzok or Lisa Page or whatever, have individual criticisms, go ahead. But this, I get very concerned as someone who views himself as pro-law enforcement when I hear people just saying, well, the FBI is this, and the FBI is part of the deep state, and it's all part of a conspiracy, et cetera. I mean, that to me is dangerous stuff.
No, I agree. I mean, if you asked each one of us kind of which straw broke the camel's back, you might get some different answers. But I think there's broad agreement that there have been lots of those sorts of events and occurrences that are of major concern. I mean, one that is particularly troubling was when the president criticized the Justice Department for indicting 2 members of Congress on corruption charges, implying that it's wrong for the Justice Department to indict Republicans, and that is antithetical to the idea that we have a rule of law that matters. For me, the pardon of Joe Arpaio, tremendously concerning. As someone that thought the Mark Rich pardon in the Clinton administration was horrific. I mean, the Arpaio pardon was that many times over. The president's seeming willingness to not care about constitutional limitations on executive power, not being very interested in going through the sort of process that's required for legal change, the idea that you could change the constitutional standard for citizenship through an executive order. I certainly share the view that I know at least some of our members do, that the acting attorney general appointment is unconstitutional, and that there are plenty of people that could be appointed to that. I'm concerned about some of the attacks on the Mueller investigation. Mueller will either find things that are damning about President Trump and his campaign, or he won't. But you have to let that process play out, and you have to let the evidence come forward.
American people. I'm going to be talking more about the Whitaker appointment in a moment, and when you talk about what you say is the unconstitutionality of the appointment, it reminds me of something that I've been saying publicly, which is there's got to be a way to talk about that where it doesn't sound partisan, where it doesn't sound like I'm saying this because I want to get back at Donald Trump. And the way I try and characterize it is I say to people, there is probably no one more conservative, meaning someone who could get the conservative checks across the board than Jeff Sessions, in terms of his position in the Senate, his role in Alabama in law enforcement, et cetera. Whether you agree with him or you don't agree with him, when it comes to conservative liberal, there's probably no one very few people to the right of Jeff Sessions. And this notion that I could say, and I've said this publicly, it is well within the president's right to appoint Jeff Sessions to be Attorney General, to appoint Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, to appoint Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court in terms of their political views. That's not the same as saying the acting Attorney General should be a guy who I'm picking strictly because he said things about the Russia investigation that I agree with, and that we should be able to condemn that.
And there's a process, right? I mean, we have not had someone serve as acting Attorney General who has not been Senate confirmed to whatever position they were holding before for well over 100 years, actually around approximately 150 years. And there's a reason for that. It's because we recognize that the Attorney General is the sort of officer that the Constitution requires to go through Senate confirmation because of the power of that office. And if the president believes Matt Whitaker is someone that is worthy and deserving of that sort of power, then he should nominate him and ask the Senate to promptly confirm him. If the president thinks there's an urgent need to get someone in place who's not already in the Justice Department line of succession, he could seek for Congress to create a recess so he can make a recess appointment. There are legitimate constitutional ways for the president to try and do that, and then we could have a debate over, is Matt Whitaker the right guy? My concern is not, is he the right guy? My concern is that there are legal norms that we follow so that the American people can have faith that the Justice Department is headed by someone that it should be headed by, and that has the qualifications and the character to do that. And an acting appointment like this doesn't do that.
I hear you, but I have concerns on both fronts. I have concerns.
That's fair. That's fair.
On on the ethical front, which is, look, I don't think just some public statements about the Russia investigation necessarily make someone ineligible to serve in this role. But when it feels like the reason he's getting appointed is it's the only explanation you can think of as to why he gets the position, is because of what he said on Russia. But I'm going to talk about that in the next block, and you're welcome to stick around. I don't know what your availability is, but I want to ask you more about this organization that I think is really important. This Checks and Balances organization, a group of well-known conservative attorneys who've gotten together and right before the Federalist Society meeting to say we need to talk. Basically. Now, do you think you're going to be able to have an impact? Because the Federalist Society is really a very influential organization in conservative circles, and in particular in conservative legal circles. Do you think that you joining with this group of prominent conservative legal thinkers is going to have an impact?
I would think so. I mean, it's important to remember that the Federalist Society itself can't do this sort of thing. It doesn't issue manifestos. It doesn't endorse people. It doesn't take official positions. Members of it do, and people that work for it certainly have on their own time been involved in things, and most significantly, some individuals who work for the society have advised the administration on judges. But the Fed Society itself doesn't do those things. We as members, and most of us are members of the Federalist Society and will continue to be so, can make this sort of statement. And certainly the reaction we've gotten so far has been quite positive from people that are associated with the Federalist Society or who otherwise consider themselves to be legal conservatives or libertarians, who are thankful that some prominent voices are getting together to raise these concerns, because I think that a lot of people on the political right, who, especially within the legal community, recognize that there are some things that were some important values that are getting lost in our hyperpartisan debate. Do the attacks on the Mueller investigation bother you? Yeah, sure. And I have no idea. I'm someone who's agnostic about what there is or isn't to find. I am too. But we have a process whereby this sort of appointment is made, a process that they go through. If he is able to make a case and get convictions, then good. If he can't, well, then we should feel assured that the investigation is made. So yeah, those attacks do bother me. We need and the lack of congressional oversight bothers me. I mean, the founders' vision is that ambition should counter ambition, that the legislature should be a check on the executive, and that should be true, whichever party the chairman of a given committee is.
You were quoted in the New York Times saying there's a belief that there's an element of vindictiveness in the administration that casts a shadow. And then I read the mission statement of your organization, called Checks and Balances. And at the bottom it says, each of us speaks and acts solely in our individual capacities, and our views should not be attributed to any organization we may be affiliated with, which makes me think that you're worried that the organizations you're affiliated with are going to get punished because of what you guys are doing.
Look, I'm an academic, right? So, and I've got tenure, so I kind of guess I have that luxury. But in Washington, when you're working with a firm that has clients, when you work for an organization that has funders, this sort of thing is a concern. And I think over the last 5-10 years, with the growth in hyperpartisanship, there is overwhelming pressure to just line up on one side or the other. And clearly what we are doing is pushing against that, saying that there are certain principles which need to be more important than our partisan allegiances. And we recognize that for some people, that may put them in a difficult spot. And I certainly know of people that support our effort, but at this point in time would not be willing to come forward publicly.
This is an important organization. I got to tell you, I've been saying, as I said, I wrote this article a while ago from a sort of pro-law enforcement point of view, saying that we have got to start defending law enforcement out there from these random and unfounded attacks on law enforcement. And if you consider yourself pro-law enforcement, as I do, then you can't also just say out of the other side of your mouth, but law enforcement stinks in this country. So I appreciate, and I know you're about more than what I just said, but I appreciate what you guys are doing.